I have to say, being the last one in the other talk, I won't be the best, but I will be the one that learned the most. And may sound kind of strange to talk about a God in the context of geopolitics, but from the last few sessions that I read, for example, I found out that a lot of our analysis is based on social, political, especially the leftist, political economic analysis of global situation, of geopolitics, especially when it's related to cultural practices. But on the other hand, traditionally, Marxism, particularly, given it from in post-Enlightenment scientific research of the global situation, actually is very much anti so many things. Yeah, and then I give one example. When we talk about the South, we mentioned there's the three aspects of the SP etymology. The third one is called the loss of nouns. And actually, for me, it reads like very much like Spivak's question of can the subaltern speak. It is like in a forum, a situation like this, subaltern immediately, basically, for me, it's the South. And they have not only given a platform to speak. Actually, the whole platform is based on a intellectual framework that somehow suppress particular languages, particular ways of relating to the world, relating to the world not just in terms of experience, but also in terms of articulating with their languages, especially we say nouns. A lot of nouns have disappeared in this kind of analysis, and I think I'm glad that you have this as a lead for me to continue this as reintroducing Tudigong, the very local guardian God, into the geopolitics talk. And I would touch on a lot of issues from on this level, from the language that we use, and also from the experience that we have to face. Especially, for example, when we talk about multitude, are we talking about multitude in the sense of political economy, or multitude in the sense of real localized experience, especially experiencing people and practice, social and life practices. So that's an issue that sometimes puzzle us, and it's also easy. For example, when you look at this kind of God of the land and also the language that I may be able to use, it also sounds like New Age, or sound like something that is completely unrelated, irrelevant to our living situation. And I think from in this kind of in this case, anthropologists can do a lot of good job to bring us back to these issues. And the Tudigong that I talk about, actually, it's not a kind of a religious practice in the past. After, for example, we say, okay, Taiwan or Asia, we are now modernized, and these superstitions would disappear, or these the everyday practice of of religion, would disappear. But actually, on the contrary, it's still very present, and then there is a revival of this local and folk religion in many parts of the world. If you go to Asia, go to China, Taiwan, and I think if you go to India, it's also very present over there, given the whole process of modernization. And a particular case and point is China, because during the Chinese Revolution, especially during the Cultural Revolution in the 60s and the early 70s, the government tried to suppress the religion, especially the folk religious practices from the past. So many temples and many like customs have disappeared during that time period. And of course now with the economic reform and the opening since the 1970 late 70s, these things are coming back because it is so much embedded in the Chinese language. Yeah, everyday practice, even though you are just doing things at home, you still observe the Chinese New Year. Moon Festival is coming in like 1 week, and all these holidays related to lunar calendar from the agricultural period are still very close to inside Chinese languages and in everyday life. So there is a revival of folk religion even inside China right now. And what I show here, is a god that has a special relationship to everyday life, because this god is called Tudigong. It means the land. Tudi is the soil, the ground. And then there's a guardian, a tutelary guardian. And of course, this kind of deity has existed in many cultures. And even when I went to Latin America, I also saw that. And then even inside Europe here, when I went to, for example, like Austria, in the mountain, when you do the mountain trail, you will find small like altars, like this, shrines and altars, even something more, simple. Like, placing some rocks on the roadside or in the mountain somewhere, and what I want to say is that people are still practicing it and actively. And then so of course now it comes to the issue of enlightenment, or the things that we know as modernity, that expelling these kind of experiences and practices. And I would quickly go through this to see how, for example, when we talk about migration. Yeah, of course now the migration, when in presence, is actually migration, almost like a forced migration, and from political by political and economic forces, like unwilling migration. But even in the situation like unwilling migration, where you leave a ground where you have to move somewhere else. In the Chinese folk religion, you have to still say goodbye to your land, to where you were for a long while, and then you come to the new place. Then when you settle, you have to worship a new, like Tudigong, a new god, and then establish a new relationship with the local, the land. Yeah, and so by doing that, of course, most people just find a spot in the in the scenario, in the living, like in the neighborhood, and then place some stones and feel like, okay, there is some special feng shui where you feel like this is where the god should be. and then you place a stone, or sometimes just bring incense there every day and bring flowers every day, and then you contemplate also during this kind of worship. And the worship has to do with the blessing of the environment, the whole nature, the whole this physical environment, to be friendly, to be going well. And it is at the moment you can see quite still actively practice. And another part of Tudigong is that he is part of the hierarchy in the Chinese deity system hierarchy, and he is the lowest. And in that sense, he's also the most localized, instead of in the opposition to, for example, the Jade Emperor, who is basically the imperial emperor, and far away and overlooking through the whole universe, the whole land. And so the Tudigong in that sense is very acting very much like an elderly person, the father, the grandfather in the neighborhood, where you can ask things, where you can pray for things, and then to ask for advices or for protection of this whole land, the whole neighborhood. And it is you can see call it a kind of a mediator between a human and its environment, where we human having a body, you have the family, you have the friends, and then at the same time you have this whole in contemporary terms, in modern terms, you say it's called physical environment, but at the same time you want to relate to this physical environment, being having a body. And so that Tudigong we see would have different manifestation. Here is you can see that people sometimes use like very simple. How can I make it work? This is okay. And then sometimes, like in this, the upper part. Here, this is a Taiwanese Tudigong. It got like renovated many times, and then you see this like big tree. This tree normally it's you can see quite often in China or in Asia. They can grow like 300 or 500 years, and this particular tree actually is like 350 or 70 already. And then it is in the past, it is where the villagers got together and then come together to meet, to share food, or to even enjoying music, or playing puppet shows, or opera, Chinese opera. And then a sign of this of modernization is that the road would come through this. In the past, a main road would not cut through the a important site like this, and so you can say how in the process of modernization, Tudigong has to also negotiate in the environment, in the bigger picture of the economic development, and of course, this kind of environmental issue is very present. Okay, that I would talk about. And so Tudigong can be so big like this one. It becomes very established with very modern administration and management to bringing tourists and visitors and worshippers who would donate money for the operation. And that's how Tudigong would look like. Look like a Chinese. Yeah.
Like Santa Claus.
Yes, like Santa Claus. Yeah. And this one is also in Taipei, in the outskirts of Taipei. And then now let me show you another one. This is from Xiamen, from China, South China, across the Taiwan, the Taiwan Strait. You can, yeah. And this is a particular example I want to talk about in the later part. Okay, just quickly show you how now they can become so established, like a big Buddhist temple, and. But during the Cultural Revolution, this one basically disappeared already, becoming a small shrine. And then now, since the 80s, it was rebuilt and gets so big. Okay, the last picture is how now in Taiwan, when a road is being built, how they have to manage to move the Tudigong. So in general, of course, you can say Tudigong is just a site. You come to a place and then you find a new site for Tudigong. But in this case, when Tudigong becomes a part of the whole architecture itself, you want to respect that architecture as the embodiment of Tudigong. So you have to find a new site for the Tudigong. And this one, they managed to move like 250 meters away from the original site. So in this case, of course, if we go to Asia, you will see how like many like city regeneration or like construction to negotiate with the temples. Yeah, and the temple is something that you cannot just destroy. Of course, for not only its divine cause, but also because a temple like this has already established a big network of people with political powers, with their living conditions dependent on the temple itself. So you cannot just destroy it. So, okay, now comes to the uglier part of this the Tudigong issue. Of course, now when we talk about Tudigong, something more positive to say is that in the modern capitalist society, if we look at how a modern contemporary life we relate to all the things that around us basically are from a series of like abstractions. Yeah? This is, you don't know who made this one. Yeah, okay, we can say, okay, which company may be producing it and all these things, mediation. And then we can give a clear scientific, political, economic analysis of how they come to you. But this relationship is mediated by the structure that is somewhere out there. And the other point is that this whole structure that come to us operate very quickly and very efficiently. And so that's also like with like this kind of high speed and also like large scale, you can bring to so many people. And of course, that's also an issue of population. When you look at how capitalism expand itself, I think in Marx's analysis also show this part how it expanded the whole scale in the very like high quick speed. And the other part is that the most abstract, of course, for us is money. In the past, even now, of course, you still go to Tudigong and pray, for bringing wealth. Yeah. But now our problem is that money for us has become problematic because like money is dead. The money that come to you, basically you are already living on somewhere future part of your life, and also future generations, and people from different parts of the world already dependent on you, and you are already using the debt to yeah. So what I want to say is that even in a case like Tudigong, when we ask for wealth, what does it mean? And if the Tudigong give you, like really grant you your wish to make a lot of money, what does that money mean? And this is a part that influenced the practice of Tudigong, of course. And I think another important issue is this one, which the global environmentalism since the 70s becomes an important geopolitical issue. And but at the same time, the talk of, for example, of sustainable development and also the program given out by the by governments, by agencies, and the decision makers, you find out that the whole the so-called environment itself is already stripped of its spiritual meaning, and it has become something that can go into scientific calculations for economic returns, and also you can manage it to the benefit of human welfare. And this already as a critique given by Viswanathan from India, an important intellectuals, a long critique from the 90s. He called it as an anthropocentric universalist bureaucracy. Okay, now we talk about the last one, which is the which is the temple, the Tudigong temple in Xiamen that I just mentioned, which becomes so big. And as an example of post, in China, it's difficult to say, post-communism, because Chinese situation is hyper-modernity and hyper-capitalism. You can say it's a neoliberalist, communist, authoritarian regime. But on the other hand, okay, here if we look at the details of these cultural practice, in the local level. The Tudigong in Xiamen that you just saw, it's an example of how the recent geopolitical change has has also changed its practice. Yeah, because in China, the south provinces like Fujian, Guangdong, they since the 14th, 15th century, they have a huge migration outside of China to Taiwan, to Southeast Asia. And then so many of the folk religions are actually kept in all these countries, in the Chinese communities and also in the non-Chinese communities. And so after the Chinese reform, when the local Chinese people want to bring back these folk religions, they will come to a place like Taiwan to relearn, so to speak, and also to bring back that tradition. And but in the case of making connection with Taiwan, there is one more complication, which is that during the in the 80s and the 90s, and when the Taiwan becomes a democratic country, and then the economic reform continue to, because the factories have moved out of Taiwan, in the 80s and the late 70s. So Taiwan has to rebuild itself as a part of the world factory. So it made links with China, and the Chinese government want to sustain its own China policy. So they welcome the Taiwanese factories to build inside China, and so this connection between Taiwan and China is complicated by these the relationship, geopolitical relationship. And then, so the story of this Xianyue mountain temple, the Tudigong temple, is that the temple, the local people try to rebuild the temple, but they need the funding from the, from the government. The government say they don't have enough money, so they ask Taiwanese business people to donate a huge amount of money, because the Taiwanese also want to build factories and make friends with the locals. So they donate a lot of money into the rebuilding of this one. And then in terms of customs and the practices, they learn, the Chinese locals who come to Taiwan or Malaysia to learn how to do it, and then how to write the history of Tudigong. And then, so on top of that, the Chinese government give a big land to build the temple, and also build it as a park. And then from there, they make an annual Tudigong festival. And it has been on already since 2008. So a last point. Unlike those local shrines for Tudigong, which still quite present in Asia, in Chinese communities, many Tudigong temples in cities and towns in the region have become the winner of the current international geopolitics, and that is built on this new connection between the China and overseas Chinese community in Southeast Asia and with Taiwan. So I quickly end here, just as some addition to to the talk and to the vocabulary, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of issues to talk about based on this. Yeah, thank you.